Okay, hi, good afternoon. Welcome everybody to the 6th session in this semester's Digital Approaches to Cultural Heritage syllabus of SunoikisisDC. Today we have two presenters who will be very familiar to anybody who's ever even glanced sidelong at Sunoi in the past. Valeria Vitale from the Alan Turing Institute and Paula Granados García from the British Museum. And they're going to be talking about linked geographical data and with a bit of an introduction to linked open data in general. Just a very quick comment beforehand. Those of you watching live, please use the live chat feature, which you'll find to the right of the video on YouTube, to say hi now if you want. It's always nice to see who's with us, but also to ask any questions as we go along and join the discussion at the end. We'll have about an hour of presentations and then another half hour in which we can discuss, and we'll also talk a bit about a proposed exercise for you to go away and try out at the end as well. If you're not watching live, welcome anyway. You obviously can't join the live conversation, but please feel free to use this material and any of the materials that we've made available in the Sunoi session page, which you can find linked below this YouTube video, in your teaching or learning at any point in the future. We've CC licensed most things where we're allowed to do so. So please do. Without any further ado, I'll hand over to the speakers. I think, Paula, are you starting? Yep. Okay, I'll hand over to Paula.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Gabby. Okay, so I will be starting today giving a short introduction to linked open data, which is a kind of tricky thing for me because my PhD was on linked open data, so it's kind of difficult to summarize everything in like a few slides, but yeah, let's try to look at it together. And yeah, so if you want to share my slides, I can start giving the introduction. Are we sharing the slides? Because I cannot see the screen.
Yes, we are.
Great, perfect. So the plan for my presentation today is just to give this short introduction to linked open data, focusing a bit on the basic concepts and technologies that make it possible, and then just a brief explanation on the LOTLAM network. So what is linked open data? Well, most of you may have seen this already, but just to be a bit pedantic, the term linked open data with the capital L, O, and D refers to the ensemble of technologies, data, and community effort that allows the user to produce, model, and publish structured data on the web in an open and linked format. However, with lowercase letters, L, O, D, or in its case, the O and the D, linked open data, refers more specifically to the data sets or files that meet the above definition and requirement. So linked open data in capitals is kind of the technologies, the paradigm, the concepts, and then the linked open data in lowercase is kind of the data itself that has been published, meeting the requirements. Okay, so, but more specifically, what is linked open data? So linked open data is a method for publishing structured data on the web so that it can be interlinked. It builds upon standard web technologies like HTTP, RDF, and URIs, which we will explain later. And rather than using the web, so the main concept is that it helps us, linked open data, to use the web rather than just to show documents or web pages for human readers, to turn it into a place to share information in a way that it can be accessed automatically by computers. So that's the key concept behind linked open data. So we keep talking about linked open data. There are like 3 images that everybody kind of puts in every linked open data presentation, which are these 3 things. In the first place, we have the famous linked open data map, which kind of collects the requirements for 5-star linked open data. Then we have a photo of Tim Berners-Lee, who is the father of the web and who also came up with the concepts behind the linked open data paradigm. And we also have a picture of a triple, which is called a triple because it has 3 different things. And that's why we have this icon with the 3 items. And we will explain later what it means and what it is for. So first, let's start by the key, the basics, the 5 stars criteria for linked open data. What do we need to make our data available as linked open data? How do we know it's linked open data or not? So the first requirement, the first star, means that the data needs to be available so that people can access it and reuse it. And this is very easy to do, just publishing data on the web that it is available. It can be an image, it can be a PDF. Just for that, you just get 1 star. To go into the second star, the data should be available as structured data. So rather than images or PDF, you need to upload structured data. The third star, you get it if the data is available in a non-proprietary format. What does this mean? It means it cannot be, for example, an Excel file, but rather it should be non-proprietary, so CSV file, for example. You don't require specific software to read it. For the 4 star, you should publish your data following open standards from the web. From the web consortium, such as URIs, RDF, and Sparkle. We will go further into this and explain what this means. And finally, for the 5 star, you need to follow all of the above. So these are accumulative. You need to get, you only get the 5 stars if you have accomplished the other requirements. And for the 5 star, you need to comply with all of the above and also link to other data that's already online on the web. So why linked open data? Why do we need to, or why do we why we would want to publish data as linked open data on the web? First of all, the accessibility. If we publish the data on the web, the data is available, the user is able to access, is able to reuse it, and is able to link to other data sets published as linked open data. Second, for the standards. Openness in the standards allow users to understand and reuse the format, the data in the long term. So that means that research is built on, it's not started from scratch. We can build on the information and the research that other people have done before. Third, interoperability. Using URIs, as we will explain, you are able to interlink the information. So the information, your data is enriched and enlarged, and it links to other data sets, so you enrich it. Fourth, contextualization. The data is enriched and therefore is contextualized. It can be searched and it can be is referenceable. So you can see disambiguate. You can understand that each of the pieces of your data are unique and what they mean. And finally, reutilization, which is also kind of connected to the interoperability and the contextualization. You can reuse the data that's available. And this means that it has an open-ended potential because you can build on it. Next, another of the key questions that everybody mentions when speaking about linked open data is the so-called web of data as opposed to the web of documents. And so this is a key concept that we need to understand when we explain linked open data. So basically the current, well, the web as it started as a web of documents. It means that the web pages are kind of, we are able to understand them as humans. We can read the web pages that are connected, and we are using hyperlinks to move from one web page to the other. But computers cannot actually understand the data that underlies in that web page. They cannot read the content of the web page. And so actually, when Tim Berners-Lee first conceived the World Wide Web in 1989, he had this goal of generating an information space in which both the humans and machines could process, share, and interconnect the information. And so that is the kind of objective of the semantic web and linked open data. Is a web of data, a web in which we are connecting the data entities by type links. And so information can be read by software agents, by the computers themselves. So what is the linked open data recipe? And I've already mentioned some of these technologies before. It is constituted by these three, it requires more things, but mainly these three concepts that we are going to explain further in a bit. So it is constituted by the URIs, the RDF, and ontologies. So URIs, unique resource identifiers, we already know this, it's kind of a common concept. And with linked open data, we need to use URIs, more specifically HTTP URIs, as the name for our data entities. So those URIs, our data entities are kind of embedded in those URIs, and so people can find those things and interconnect them on the web. Next, we need the RDF, which is the, it stands for Resource Description Framework. It's kind of the abstract model to model the information as linked open data, and we will get back to it. And finally, the ontologies, which are kind of the models or vocabularies to model your data, so that both the computer and the researcher or the person that generates the data set kind of have the same concept, understand what's the concept behind the data. We will explain it in a bit. So the first kind of requirement, the first technology are the URIs, Uniform Resource Identifiers, which are kind of the most popular web standard, or a web standard that kind of everybody know. And they are kind of a type of identifier that is constituted by a string that can be used to refer to a resource on the web, but also an email, an address, a telephone number, etc. They should be dereferenceable. That means that they can be looked up on the web, for example, by a browser. So we can dereference the URI and see what it means. And then the type of URIs that we use in linked open data are the HTTP URIs that are used to refer to entities, and they are in the scheme of the HTTP scheme. And then we need to make sure that we understand the difference between URIs and URLs. URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator, and they are locators for web addresses. So when you click on a URL, you will see a website. It takes you to a website, a web page, but that doesn't happen with URIs, or not necessarily. URIs not necessarily need to render a web page, but what they do is just identify your data entity. So it can, but not necessarily. Sometimes they may only give you the RDF behind that data entity. So they will show you the data, but not necessarily a web page. So what is RDF, or what this stands for? So as I said, RDF stands for for resource. RDF is kind of the abstract data model at the center of the linked open data method. It stands for Resource Description Framework. Sorry, it went out of my mind. And so the basic principle of the RDF is the triple. That's called a triple, as I said, because it has three main parts. And these three main parts are kind of the basic statement that's behind RDF, and is the most basic sentence that one can construct, which is constituted by subject, predicate, and object. So we have the subject, and then we have the object, which is what we are saying about the subject, and the predicate is kind of the relationship between the subject and the object. And so the most interesting bit of this is that for a triple, we are saying, for example, as here we're saying John born in 1945. But however, the subject of one triple can become the object on another triple. And the object in this triple we're mentioning can be the subject of another triple. So that's how the kind of data builds in, and the network, the information, the graph grows, okay? Because it's kind of this graphic model in which we enrich the triples with other triples. The three elements in the triple may be URIs. That's the key. That's what we were saying before. And the URI in this triple normally comes from an ontology or a vocabulary, as we will explain later. And as I was saying, the predicate kind of brings meaning into the connection between the subject and the object. And so this meaning is what the computer understands, is the semantic aspect of the data. The computer can understand that John is born in 1945. And we have explained in the ontology what born in means. So that's how the software agent can read and understand the data. Here we have another example, a graph visualization of different triples. And I think it's a really nice example from the RDF primer. And so here we can see how Bob, this person from this example, is a person, is also a friend of Alice. He was born on 14th July 1990, and is interested in, for example, the Mona Lisa. And so the Mona Lisa, as we all know, was created by Leonardo da Vinci and is about, and here we have, a video, for example, La Gioconda Washington, that is about this masterpiece, La Mona Lisa. So I think this is a really nice example to see how all data sets kind of can be interconnected and how the data connects. So here on the right, we have an example from Wikidata that connects to our own example about Bob, right? And they connect by this property saying that Bob is interested in the Mona Lisa. So we have kind of two different data sets, if we want, that can be interconnected by a predicate that connects to different, a subject and an object in this kind of a statement, three parts statement. Okay, so this predicate, as I was explaining, has a meaning, no? We are bringing meaning into the relationship between the subject and the object, and that's the meaning that is collected in the so-called ontologies. And so what are ontologies? Ontologies are kind of vocabularies where we can define these URIs, we can define these concepts in a way that both the human and the computer kind of understand what we mean. And so these ontologies are processable files that enable us to define the complexity of the data set. So we can define to what extent the data set is going to be is going to go into detail to explain a specific domain, a specific field of knowledge, or it's going to sit on the surface to just explain certain concepts. We can decide to what extent our ontology, our vocabulary is going to define reality, is going to describe a specific piece of knowledge. As I was saying, they define concepts, they define data categories and connections between those data categories. And ultimately, what ontologies are a file read by a piece of software. So it is a file that we can create that the software can read to understand what we mean by specific concepts in our data set. For example, things like person, place, whatever whatever concept we are using in the data set, we can define it in these ontologies so that the computer can understand what we mean by that concept. And so, as part of my presentation, I wanted to kind of give a brief overview of the LODLAM network or the LODLAM community. And because you will be coming across this because it's kind of growing and it's becoming a big movement. And so, as you all know, for the last 30 years, we could say, a significant amount of resources and money has been invested in the digitization of the collections of the GLAM sector, which is the sector for the galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. And this, so it has been invested in the digitization of these resources, but also in the generation of the metadata required to describe and document such collections. However, there is a lot of work to do in terms of connecting those collections to improve searchability and to enrich the information hosted. And this is why the LODLAM movement or network has emerged and is the first objective of the community's kind of applying linked open data to move from this idea of just showcasing the collections to a deeper idea of users accessing the collections, but also reusing them and interconnecting them and be able to kind of engage further with the collections themselves. And so just to summarize, what is LODLAM? So as it's obvious, it refers to linked open data for libraries, archives, and museums. And it has emerged because cultural institutions are kind of recognizing the importance of linked open data and what it brings into the table. And so they are including linked open data and open access in their digital strategies. This has led to the emergence of a wide range of initiatives to generate, publish, and sustain linked open data. And it is important to understand that it's not kind of a centralized way of doing things, but rather it has emerged from different domain relevant case studies. So different examples of different institutions that are applying linked open data that have their own necessities and have their own solutions. And this is generating this kind of organic and dynamic environment in which we are learning from what other people do. Different institutions are having different plans on how to improve and how to apply linked open data. And that's what's behind this. And so, however, there are two key questions to all these, I would say. The main one is, what are the relevant elements? So we still need the relevant metadata to understand what we need to connect, what we need to link, and how. And second, how do we connect these entities? So we are, as in the same way, we need the right relationships between the different entities. And so, which have been the motivations for this? Which are the aims, objectives, and motivations for the LODLAM? So, I would say, in the first place, kind of interlink all this cultural heritage information that's there on the web from a variety of sources, with the aim to achieve semantic interoperability in cultural heritage. To allow, this would allow ultimately to ask bigger questions that couldn't be asked from individual pieces, in individual collections. It reaches across museums, libraries, and archives. It is international, and it has a multidisciplinary approach. And it involves very different domains, as I was saying before, from collection description, archives, administration, science, scholarship, etc. So they are looking at many different domains. And finally, so this LOTLAM is constituted by many, many different members, and they are not at all like all represented here, but just to give you an idea of what parties are represented, or what institutions are kind of involved in LOTLAM. For example, there is the Getty vocabularies that have been published as a LOD and contain a structured terminology for art and other material culture, archival materials, visual surrogates, bibliographic materials, and many more, and they can be queried as linked open data and reused. There is the American Art Collaborative, that is kind of a consortium of 14, well, of maybe more art museums in the United States, which is kind of committed to establish a critical mass of linked open data, and they are creating really, really amazing tools and kind of strategies on how to do this. There is also Europeana, the European Aggregated Cultural Data Initiative, and well, there are different services, but there is the Linked Data Europeana EU, which started in 2020 under the projects Europeana Connect and Europeana Volume 2. In a kind of consensual effort to put their metadata like linked open data on the web. There is also the Library of Congress Linked Data Service, which kind of provides interactive and matching access to the library's authorities and the bibliographic metadata, along with other commonly found standards and vocabularies used by the Library of Congress. And there is also Research Space, which was is considered a knowledge system, which was developed by the British Museum and supported by the Andrew Mellon Foundation, which is kind of helping to generate linked open data using the CDOC-CRM conceptual reference model, which is a kind of ontology for cultural heritage information, which kind of provides again definitions for different concepts like actor, events, and also places. And I think that's what Valeria is going to talk about now, about linked open data and places, geographic linked open data.
Thank you, Paula. That's great. Before we hand over to Valeria, if I may just sort of break protocol very briefly, there's a question was appeared in the chat, which I think it's a question of definitions, and so I think it might be worth addressing now. And it's just to clarify that we understand what an ontology is, Paula. And if you want to address this, a suggested paraphrase of your definition there is an ontology an ensemble of attributes of entities within a particular domain? Does that sum it up?
Ensembles of attributes of entities inside a certain domain. Yeah, that could be a kind of a definition. It is an ensemble. It's like it can be attributes, entities. If you mean, it's because entities can mean many different things. An entity can be a subject, it can be an object, or it can be a relationship between two different entities.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
But this is one thing that an ontology could be a collection of attributes describing your entities, right? It can also be relationships between entities. It can also be the ontology can also define classes of things which are go ahead. Yeah.
No, may I say that I think that ensemble could be a bit of a misleading word for it, because ontologies tend to be very highly structured. As you were saying, Gabby, they may have, they usually have classes and subclasses and things like that. While ensemble to me sounds more like just a group. So I would call it maybe a structured ensemble or a structured, number of attributes and properties and relationships within a certain domain. So I think that Anita was mostly correct. It's just that, some words might be a little bit, fuzzy and potentially misleading.
Yeah, so the concept of the thesaurus, the structured definition of the world, I think is probably worth keeping in mind. That ontologies tend to be very, very structured. Although I think the sense that they are very domain specific, I think is absolutely right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Great. Thank you both, and thank you, Anisa, for the question. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Over to Valeria then for the more concrete geo-linked open data aspect.
Thank you, Gabby, and thank you, Paula, for a great introduction to linked open data. Is never easy to introduce people to linked open data. It sounds like a very abstract concept that when you get it, it's such a fascinating technology. And I hope that by the end of this seminar, you will all be enthusiastic supporters of linked open data. Okay, so after Paula introduced the aims and a little bit of the technology, and also introduced the relevance of this technology for cultural heritage, for digital collections, for the GLAM sector, and she started asking these big questions like what should we connect, what should we link, and in what ways. Well, there are obviously many ways and many perspectives and many possible approaches to link and to connect different pieces of information, different documents, different entities. The one that we're going to look at in the second half of this seminar are spatial place-related information and place-related URIs and place-related entities. And I will start maybe discussing with you why should we care about these kind of connections and why these connections can actually be interesting for the public and relevant for the professionals in cultural heritage, like curators, librarians, and researchers, like some of us. So I'm now going to share my slides. And can you please confirm that you're seeing my slides?
Yes, we are.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. So, basic question, why should we talk about place? There are so many kinds of linked open data. Why should we focus on place? Well, again, there could be many answers. I decided to focus on these two ones, these two perspectives. And one is that everything happens in a place. If you think about it, it's pretty obvious. But if you connect this, piece of experience to the fact that all historical events happened in a place, all artistic objects were created in a place, belonged to with a particular material that was maybe mined or produced in a certain place. So place actually is something that is ubiquitous to our lives and to basically all the things that we deal with. So we are rich in place information. And the other, let's say, more practical, more concrete reason to focus on place is that compared to many other parameters, place is a kind of information that is relatively standardized, that it has been relatively standardized through the years. And if a geographer would listen to me now, would probably have an heart attack because there are so many projections and representations of the words and so on. And of course, there are, this is undeniable. But if we think, compared to other kind of data, place data are definitely, let's say, one step ahead in terms of standardization, in terms of being immediately recognizable, compared, for example, to time periods, which are even more, let's say, contentious than place information. And places can be very, very powerful aggregators of information, aggregators of documents. And there are, a number of initiatives and projects that have really flourished around this idea. The connections around places are possible and are interesting and relevant. And one example is definitely the Pelagius project I used to be part of. I'm very proud of that. And I believe that one of your readings for this week is also about the Pelagius project. And I'm really happy about that, because I think that it was a very important project that ran from 2011 to 2019, and was entirely built on the idea of connecting digital resources about the past through their shared place references. And even just with a very simple window API like Peripleo, which is an open API, you can play with it if you like. It's peripleo.pelagius.org. Even just this simple proof of concept with data coming from different institutions, like we have the British Museum and the Epigraphic Database of Heidelberg and numisma.org, and even just these simple ways of showing, okay, these different objects that belong to completely different collections that have been created for completely different purposes, they all refer to the same place. They have something in common. And this something, you have to investigate what is this connection, but you see that there is a connection, can be a starting point. It can be really, really powerful. Another project I was involved with was this British Library project. Was led by the British Library, but also involved other institutions, and it was called Locating a National Collection. And again, it was a concept that was quite similar to Pelagius in the sense that it was about using place information to create bridges between different collections, between different digital collections, a little bit like Paula was telling us before. But another thing that emerged during LANC, while I was working on LANC and talking to professionals and talking to members of the audience, is that actually place is also a very, very good way of engaging the audience with pieces of cultural heritage, with collections, and with and with other things that are in our museums and archives. And again, through a lot of interviews and focus groups and questionnaires and things like that, we really try to poke at this very very deep relationship that we have with places, and how this relationship is embodied by our relationship with cultural heritage. And there were some things that recurred. I mean, of course, everyone is different and everyone has, their own experience and preferences, but there were things that recurred. And one was definitely the association between place and memory. And it's about the fact that we care about past, our personal past, our family past, and we are interested in things that relate to the place we're from, or relate to the place our family is from, or a place we used to spend our summer holidays. And this is a picture that for example is very relevant to me because it is a very old picture of my hometown, and it's probably not relevant to anyone else in this conversation, but that is exactly the point, that the relevance is not intrinsic to the object, but it is in the member of the audience that has an affective, it has a mnemonic connection to it. And another egregious, let's say, proof of this feeling, of the reason why, place connections can be really powerful, was the success of this initiative that was called GB 1900. It was about transcribing places on ordnance survey maps. This was a very successful project, and we'll come back to this project if we have time at the end, because I have something more to say about it. And And what I went to the let's say closing ceremony of this project, and they were interviewing some of the most active volunteers that contributed to the transcription, and what all said was that they like to transcribe the places of their past. Another thing that it's pretty obvious, but it was really interesting to hear people talking about it, is that place is very much connected to our identity. We identify with the places of our lives. We identify with the culture of the place we're from, or the place that we have chosen as our, let's say, adoptive home. And there are obviously a lot of great projects that investigate this connection. It's a beautiful digging into early colonial Mexico that also looks at representation of places and the evolution of place names. And talking about place names, I just want to share with you one of my favorite tweets ever. I had to screenshot it because it was amazing. And it was, I thought it was a joke. Maybe it was a joke. I really hope it's a joke. I'm not sure it's a joke. Someone was saying that a street in a part of London that is, mostly inhabited by Indian people had one of its street names changed because it used to be named after, someone that was, pretty brutal with Indian people. So they renamed it with something that was relevant to the population that lived there and not offensive. And someone complained and said, "What a lot of nonsense! What if we went to India and started to change their street names?" And I will let that sink in, because it is tragically ironic. But again, place names do play an important role in our history and in our cultural identity. And attempts to change them and enforcing changes on them are one of the most common and obvious expression of colonialism. And last, there is the concept of proximity. So we tend to care more about the things that are close to us. And a demonstration of this concept was the success of this other project that was based on place connections, and it was called, I always get this wrong, I think A Street Near You. And it was a beautiful project that basically lets you visualize information about the people that participated to World War I and that used to live in your street. And you can find their documents, sometimes even a picture, and you can find out, when they were born and exactly in what street, they used to live. Maybe they used to live in your same block, and so on. And this was very, very successful. People really, really related to that. Okay, this was a not so brief introduction to why place is relevant for cultural heritage, and why connections that revolve around places can be interesting and are useful for engagement and as tools for research. And before I move on to the tool that we want to show to you today as a way to create your own place connections and decide by yourself if they are useful and interesting and what else could be done with that, I need to tell you something about gazetteers. So you remember that Paula mentioned URIs, and that in a linked open data environment, we use URIs to refer to entities. So we don't talk about entities by their name, because a machine wouldn't understand if we used their name, but we refer to entities through URIs, through these unique identifiers that are like a telephone number, a thumbprint. They're unique to that particular entity. And URIs are often, let's say, collected in curated lists. so that we can find, all the URIs for a particular domain in the same place, well maintained and systematized. For places, so collections of URIs that talk about places are called digital gazetteers. So they are basically lists of digital information about places. However, gazetteers are very, very powerful and are very, very useful and interesting objects. First, gazetteers help us disambiguating references. Like if we find a mention of a place, through using that unique identifier, we can say, okay, it's definitely that place and not another place that maybe is called in a similar way or in the exact same way. But I really love gazetteers. I really have a thing for gazetteers because think how difficult and how challenging and how fascinating it is to try and put all our information about places in the past, which is, a quite nuanced concept, into structured data. It's not trivial, it's not easy, and I think that gazetteers, and some more than others, do a fantastic job at, making the most of structured data to express such such complex concepts like our knowledge of place. But also another important thing that URIs and gazetteers do, and we'll go back to that if I manage to give you just a brief tutorial of Recogito, they also improve metadata a lot for those GLAM institutions that we were mentioning before. Because if we start thinking of metadata with URIs, then really the potential for connecting documents in different collections automatically, just through the matches of these URIs that are in the metadata, becomes really, really, substantial. So yeah, thank you, gazetteers. And just to give you a couple of examples in practice of how gazetteers work, you may have gotten it by now, but just to be absolutely sure, let's look together at these two examples. So we have two maps, and we are looking at these two cities. One is called London, and one is called Londra. And by looking at the map, and if we know a little bit of English and just a little bit of Italian, we can very easily understand that we're talking about the same city. However, a machine, especially without any visual support like the map, wouldn't recognize them as the same city because, it wouldn't be a perfect string match. A string match means that the letters that compose the word should have to be exactly the same. And they're not, because London and Londra have different letters. So as it is, an API, a machine, a computer wouldn't recognize that two researchers talking about London and Londra are referring to the same place. But if we use the same URI from a gazetteer, for example, the GeoNames gazetteer, there we are, they have the same URI. So everyone, the person and the machine, can understand unambiguously that that is the same city. Likewise, we could look at the city of London in the UK and the city of London in the US, and they seem like a string match. They are a string match indeed, but they're not the same entity. And what makes that absolutely clear is that they don't have the same URI. So let's have a look at how a gazetteer looks like. And this is my absolute favorite gazetteer. I cannot think of a better gazetteer. And we're lucky because it's a gazetteer of the ancient world. So if you're a classicist, this is most likely the gazetteers that you will be using. It's called the Pelagius gazetteer, and you find it online. It's an open resource. It's actually collaborative. So if you are now getting, you're falling in love with gazetteers, the good news is that you can be part of it. You create an account and start contributing. So this is just a screenshot of the first half of a gazetteer page in Pleiades, the page for the city of Akragas or Agrigentum. So there is more information, but just in this first half, you see that there is a map view, there is a location, there can be more than one location. There are variant names, which are very, very important, because that means that whatever of the listed names we use in our search, they will all be recognized as belonging to the same main entity. And that is, is crucial, especially if you work with ancient places. And then we find relationships, and if you could scroll, you would see citations, bibliography, external links, and so on. But I would say that the most important thing that there is in this page is this one, and that is the URI. That is the unique identifier, the unique reference to the ancient city of Agrigentum. And thanks to, if we use this URI when we tag our collections or other documents, and we are in a system that recognizes this URI, then documents and coins and epigraphies and text that refer to this place can be connected automatically by a machine. And this is the last thing that it's the penultimate thing that I want to say about gazetteers, and that's because this is going to be useful to us when we're going to work on Recogito. So there are many gazetteers, and that is actually a great thing because the word is rich and complex, and it would be impossible to have a single gazetteer for every single place on the earth at any given point in time. That would be pointless. So gazetteers tend actually to be specific. They focus on sometimes a place, sometimes a period, sometimes a particular perspective, and each of them have their own URIs. So for example, we have a URI for the ancient city of Londinium in the Pleiades gazetteer, but we have a different URI for the contemporary city of London, the capital of the UK, in the GeoNames gazetteer. And if you think that this is confusing or counterintuitive, then also, ask yourselves, these two cities that are, share more or less the same geographical location, are they actually the same place? Can we say that they are the same place? I would say no. So I agree that they should have different URIs. This is the very last thing I wanted to say about gazetteers and about collecting the place names, which is incredibly useful, especially when you are researching ancient sources. And this is just an example of the variant names that a single building in Pompeii collected through time. And you can see that it's a very long list, and that is pretty unpredictable. Okay, I think that this was, yes, indeed, the end of our brief tour of linked open geodata. I'm now going to show you very, very briefly the tool that you will use for your exercise. And it's an open tool. It's online, doesn't require any installation. You should have created an account in advance. It's called Recogito. I'm now going to leave my slides and go to my Recogito account. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to show you a full tutorial because there are so many of them, you have no idea. Just go back to some previous Sunoikis class about Recogito, or there is also a full tutorial in the resources of the page that you are free to use. So I'm going to give you just the very, very basic of how Recogito works, which is just how to create the annotations. And so this is your working area. Here are all your documents after you will have uploaded many of them. And let me pick, I prepared one for you. I think it's this one. It should be blank. Yes, it's blank. So you can upload either text or images. I'm going to show you quickly how to annotate text. If you're curious about images, again, you will find everything in the tutorial. And this is how the uploaded text look like. Please remember that you can only annotate text in .txt format. To create your annotation, it's really simple. You just highlight the word, and maybe you log in first. Yeah. Okay, so you highlight the word, and you have this very simple pop-up, and you can choose between 3 categories or no categories at all. But if you say place...
Valeria, is it possible to make the text a little bit larger, please?
Okay. Is it? Yes.
Thank you.
Do you see it better now?
Yes, that's perfect. Thanks.
Okay. So if you say place, you basically activate all the geo features of Recogito. So what is happening is that Recogito is trying to match the string that you have highlighted, the word that you have highlighted, with is collection of gazetteers. Recogito has like 7 or 8 gazetteers. You can find out about them in the annotation preferences. And what it's trying to do is, okay, let me see if there is any place that is called Syracuse in any of the gazetteers that I have. And it's suggesting this match. And I'm pretty sure that this is not what Thucydides had in mind. So we can go and say change. And when you say change, this is what happens. That you are given a few other options. And you see that there are different colors here, and they identify the different gazetteers that we were talking about before. So the green G is geo-names, the blue P is Pleiades, this is the digital atlas of the Roman Empire, and so on. And you also have a map that helps you choosing. And we know that we don't want any of these, but we definitely want the one that is in Sicily. And we could actually just go straight to the one that is in Pleiades, because we would know that is the ancient place that we want. These 3 are all together because they have been aligned. That means that they have recognized that they're talking about a place that has the same coordinates, but still from slightly different perspectives. And we want this one. And we say, you see that this is now my name. It has now a timestamp. We can say, okay. If there are more occurrences of the word that you have annotated, you can reapply the annotation or not, or in between options, all explained in the tutorial. Let's say yes. And seriously, I'm really tempted to just stop here, because this is all you need to know to create annotations in Recogito. And let me show you just the outcome of this. I'm going to show you a version that has been annotated by other students. Okay, so let's say that we have spent a little bit of time annotating this. One thing that you can do in Recogito is switch from the document view to the map view, like this. And you can see the places that you have annotated on the map. And if you click on the map, you will see the annotations and how many there are, and you can browse them. Now, one thing that I want to show you, because this is useful for your exercise, is that you can use tags. And let's do tags. And for tags, I've not shown this map in a while, and I think I should. There it is. It's an image, but it's the same concept. It doesn't matter. So when you annotate an image, it's exactly the same thing. You can go to the map view and see the places on the map. Now, if you go on this cog here, this cog icon here, you can actually change the visualization. And you, for example, can choose to visualize things by tag. And you see that it creates a little legend. And if you have used tags in the annotation, again, look at the tutorial. I mean, it's really straightforward. You just add the tags, and then you can use the tags for your visualization. And for example, here we have made a distinction between between places that have been identified with certainty and places that have not been identified with enough certainty. So, but you can choose any tag you want, and then you can use it in your visualization. Just bear in mind that only the first, you can add many tags, but only the first tag is relevant for the visualization. And now I'm going to show you, okay, I'm going to show you another kind of visualization. And this is, let's say, a document that is made of different files, like the document that you're going to use for your exercise. And when you visualize the annotations, you can choose to visualize by part. And it will, again, create a little legenda, a little index, and it will assign a different color to each of the files. In this case, each of the files is a book of the Argonautica. So, for example, we can look at, what places are mentioned in a particular part or section of the book, and so on. But this is just, another possibility that you have when you create your annotations in Recogito. Let me think if I showed you everything that you need for the exercise. I think I have. Then maybe the last thing that I can do is show you the relationship. So no. Okay. So there is another annotation mode in Recogito that is, let's say, a little less developed. So it's a little bit more fiddly, but it can be very interesting if you are into that. And to activate it, you need to go into here, relations. And basically what it does is it lets you connect two things.
Can you zoom in again, please?
Yes. Sorry, I'm on a very small laptop. It allows you to connect two entities that you have already annotated, like you're seeing here. So let me, for example, if I wanted to connect these two, we'll do like this, and then write what is the relationship that connects them. And you see it also has a direction, so you go, in which direction the relationship goes, and so on. As you can see, it is a little bit fiddly, and if the terms are in funny bits of the text, then you start seeing things like this. But it can be very rewarding, and it also can generate very interesting network visualizations, because when you go into the download options, and again, I will invite you to look at the tutorial to discover all the download options. I can, in the meantime, show you like this. There are also download formats specific for the relations. And then you can generate network style visualizations, for example, in Gephi or in Visone. Okay, now, after this very, very, very minimal tutorial of Recogito, but I promise you, you don't need any longer than this. I'm asking you, Gabby, shall I stop and have a discussion, or do I have something like 10 minutes to talk about semantic web and machine learning?
Sorry, could you do it in 5?
Okay, I'll try. Okay, yes. I wanted to very, very briefly introduce the project that I'm working on now, which is a collaboration between various institutions that you can read in this slide. It's called Machines 3D Maps. And the reason I wanted to mention it is first because it actually uses Recogito, and also because it combines semantic web and linked open data with other technologies like computer vision and machine learning, which I find quite exciting. So at the moment, if you want to work with maps and know what's on a map, what you do is that you sit in the library and you look very, very, very closely, one map at a time, which is fantastic. It's amazing, and we all love maps, but it's also very time consuming and it's not scalable. And even initiatives like the GB 1900 we were discussing before, that used, a lot of volunteers, and it took a lot of time to be completed, and and a lot of time to curate the data and so on. So what this project wanted to do was basically using machine learning and computational methods to read the maps automatically. So to identify the text on the maps, but not only that, and try to suggest a transcription, but also to predict the semantic type. Like, for example, is this name a city? Is this name a river? Is this name a monument? And to suggest a link to an external knowledge base. So one of those lists of URIs that we were discussing before, that could be a gazetteer for places, or could be Wikidata. And yeah, this is just to give you a glimpse of how it looks like on our two corpora, which are the Ordnance Survey maps from Great Britain, and the fire insurance maps, the Sanborn fire insurance maps for the United States, for which we are collaborating with the Library of Congress. And we are now, I say we, but because there is a fantastic team of computer vision experts at the University of Minnesota, able to predict the text, and we're now working towards being able to also predict a semantic type and predict a connection, basically create predictive linked open data. And why do we want to do that? That's because it will make the maps massively more searchable and interconnected, possibly with other documents. And it will be possible, for example, to search, I don't know, either all the maps that have these tiny city that you're interested in, or actually having very, very powerful searches, almost, like Sparkle searches in linked open data. Like, for example, I want to see all the maps that have, I don't know, hospitals built on an island, for example, or whatever query that you can think of, not only based on the names of the places, but based on the semantic of the places, the typology of the places, all that, let's say, intelligent information that linked open data can hold into their connections. And I could talk about this forever, but I'm not going to do it. And I promised 5 minutes, and I'm going to stop now and stop sharing my screen.
Great, thank you, Valeria, and thanks.
I'm sharing my screen. Yes.
Yeah, good. Yeah, thank you both for the presentations. That was all really useful. I think the general introduction to linked open data, in particular linked open data for cultural heritage, was both very useful in its own right, but also really good grounding for then the further discussion of linked open data, specifically with reference to place and space that Valeria talked about. Anyone who's watching, please feel free to use the live chat, which has mostly been taken up with posting of URLs and then worrying when the URLs didn't work from us. But please feel free to use that chat to ask questions and make comments, and we'll keep an eye on that and draw any comments in as we have already. But in the meantime, we can talk amongst ourselves, as it were. If either of you have any questions or comments for each other, please feel free to chime in. I was particularly struck by how you said that the place is one of those things that is fairly standardized, and I think that's not only because of the disciplines that have standardized work around place and space and geography and so forth, but I guess because it is in a sense it is it is more, let's say, finite than some kinds of data. So you can imagine many different disciplines having an interest in the place that is London or Londinium or whatever you called it, in the way that a particular person, you know, Alexander the Great is only of interest in one particular set of disciplines, and George Washington is only of interest in another particular set of disciplines. Much less universality to that, and the same applies to time. The same applies to categories of object, to disciplines, and so it, you know, there's all sorts of connections you can make there, and you can link together Alexander the Great and George Washington if they visited the same place, for example, which they probably did at some point. They both traveled a lot.
Yeah, no, that is exactly why place it's a great aggregator, and it does enable us to jump some traditional boundaries of single collections, single institutions, single disciplines. And, you know, that's what I meant when I said, you know, everything happens in a place, like, you know, everyone refers to place. And of course, I'm not saying that all place relationships are relevant, but that they are often a very good starting point.
Yeah. And yeah, it's one of the things that every heritage institution cares a lot about, is all the different kinds of place information associated with their artifacts, their collections, etc. You know, the place of origin, the place of creation, the provenance, the current location, etc. Those are all absolutely key to heritage things. Their data, their metadata, their all sorts of information.
Yeah, and many of the fields in the metadata and the data itself are related to place, like imminently, as well as time, I would say. Place and time are the two first things that people normally think about to kind of analyze a data set or kind of contextualize it. Time is also a bit traditional, perhaps, because some people are like linear, no? Time is linear, and so if you categorize by time, then you have this linear way of thinking, but yeah, kind of the most common.
Yeah. There are a couple more comments in the chat from Anisa. So Anita talks about Recogito and Topos Text, Pleiades, Perseus. Does anybody want to react to that?
We agree with her.
Maybe explain what's going on with these linking. I mean, I'm not sure I have all the context there.
I think that, I mean, the Topos Text project that, oh my God, the name of the guy in Athens is now escaping me. Brady, yeah. And I think that they did it like manually to connect every citation of place in ancient text to coordinates. And I think that it was in conversation with Tom Elliott, who is the director of Pleiades, to contribute this amazing, work that he has done through years, very, very detailed, very, very granular, and make it available to everyone through Pleiades. And I know, for example, that there is an instance of Recogito that is actually powers the places in Athens as obtained from Topos Text, and is the one that is used by the Pausanias project that Elton Barker and Anna Folk are working on, which I think we have also discussed at some point in one of these seminars. But yeah, thank you, Anisa. That's a great project, and I really like when gazetteers go at the urban level. I find that very, 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 very interesting. And Topos Text is really good for ancient Greek cities.
Anita also has a comment, which it's not exactly a question, but I feel like there's an implied question in here, which is that she's got this very large dictionary with all sorts of place information in it, and obviously having a sort of an annotation of that in the way that you've shown with some of these Recogito texts that you showed would be really valuable, but it would be too big a task to do manually. So what?
I wouldn't annotate a dictionary database. I would try to export a dictionary database and maybe talk with the Pleiades, team and see, discuss together if there is a format that a standard format that they can accept, or I would say definitely get in touch with them. They might be really, really interested in that. But no, I wouldn't annotate a database. I would just make the database, available as a CSV or some other format. I don't know much about an ISIS database, but I'm sure that that would be a more straightforward option than trying to annotate the database. I mean, it would be impossible. You cannot import a database in Recogito. You can only import text in Recogito. You could import a CSV in Recogito and annotate that, but at that point, you could just give the CSV to Pleiades. You can try and fetch automatically the CSV against Pleiades in Recogito, and you would have an alignment.
Yeah.
But if what you want to do is a contribution to Pleiades, then the annotation in Recogito is non-relevant.
Yeah, I feel like it's the other way around, isn't it? It's there's an NER step that's needed. That's what the linking with Recogito would achieve. So there may be place references in this database that don't have Pleiades identifiers attached to them yet. So I mean, NER might be an answer in the first step, as you say. Try doing that automatic matching and see what comes up.
If you can, Anissa, if you can export in CSV, I'm happy to. That is in the tutorial as well. You can upload the CSV and do, if the places are all in one column, you can do an automatic NER, and it will try to match it with the Pleiades database. And with ancient places is not bad.
If the place names are in English?
I think the English and Latin and transliterated Greek would work. Other languages, I'm not sure.
Portuguese?
That I don't know. I never tried. That'd be nice to be interesting to try. Yeah.
Great. Cool. Yeah, any other comments or questions anyone wanted to raise? I'm both looking at the chat and also at you all.
I'm just going to say that, like Valeria said before, linked open data can be a bit intimidating at the beginning and hard to get, maybe look a bit tricky, but once you start understanding and getting it, it's really amazing. Like the things you can do.
Yeah, and the point is you don't need to be building triples by hand using RDF XML or Turtle format or anything like that, or JSON LD. If you make an annotation in Recogito, which, as Valeria showed, is a simple matter of double clicking on something and then selecting the map place you want to associate it with, you've created a triple. Right? In fact, multiple triples there, right? I mean, it's an annotation which is probably about 6 triples in the background. So you don't need to be looking at, just as you don't need to be looking at XML when you write something in a Microsoft Word file, right? I mean, you are creating XML, but you're not seeing it. You're seeing, WYSIWYG.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. There are more and more tools that are making this both creating and consuming linked open data increasingly, easy. So it's definitely worth investing in learning linked open data.
Yeah. Cool. And for the exercise that you've you've described, so on the session page, for those of you who are not following Sunoikis primarily, below this video, there's a link to the SunoikisisDC session page, at the bottom of which is an exercise using Recogito that Valeria has mentioned already. She's made available a bunch of inscriptions. You can make a copy of that and have a talk about how to annotate it. What I wanted to say is there's a set of discussion that goes into the decisions you make around what you're annotating and what you're doing with those annotations. And we'd like to invite you to use the Sunoikisis issue tracker as a discussion forum for that. There's a ticket in there. Again, there's a link to that on the top of the session page, and just to suggest the sorts of things that you're planning to annotate and how that worked, and have other people engage with that. So there are a couple of classes of students who are potentially using that forum, but other people are welcome to join in that conversation as well.
Sorry, I promised in the instructions for the exercise that I will show something during the video. So
okay.
I should definitely do that. And I also need your help, Gabi, because you should send me, again, if you don't mind, the link to the document to share with me.
Which document?
Was it the metamorphosis? Just because I cannot show it with my own document, I need someone else to send me.
Oh, I see. You need me to share a document with you.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, let me see if I can find.
Okay.
In the meantime, while I'm looking for that, then, do you want to answer Timoleon's question?
Let me start saying that Recogito is developed by the amazing pelagius developer that is Rainer Simon, that is based at the Austrian Institute of Technology. I'm going to say scholar, but I'm not sure. That's what I overheard, but I have absolutely, no actual knowledge of the, the backend of Recogito. My guess is scholar, but if you get in touch with Rainer, there is a lot of documentation about how to install your own instance of Recogito, and the Recogito GitHub page is very, very lively with comments and issues and requests for improvement, and it's actually open source, so anyone is invited to develop little modular expansions, have their own gazetteers, and so on.
It's Recogito 2 or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the meantime, let me show you the exercise, and as soon as Gabi sends me the...
I sent you something just in your GChat.
Sorry. Okay, thank you. No, that's great. Then wait that I collect that.
And share your screen when you're ready.
Yeah, I think it's this one. Okay. Do you see my screen?
We do now.
Okay. So the document that I have prepared for you is this one. It's one of those documents, as you've seen before, that is made of a group of separate files. That means that you can play with the visualization by part if you want to. These are all inscriptions that were found in the same place. So they have a connection through place. They're not an official corpus. They are just archaeologically be found in the same place. That is the Theater of Dionysus in Athens. Some are relatively longer. Some are just, few lines. It's not a lot of text, and it's not really important that you read, the text very, very attentively. I mean, they are inscriptions. I don't think, that they are very formulaic. So sometimes you see they are very, very short. So what we are asking you is, well, first of all, look at the text and what you can do with it. Ask yourselves what would be some interesting aspects to annotate, and why. Do you want to annotate the places? Do you want to annotate the people? Do you want to annotate the relationship between the places and the people? And what the visualization could tell us, and what maybe changing the different kind of visualizations could tell us. If you use tags and visualize just the places first, and then the places according to the tags, do you see something different? And do the visualization by single epigraphy tells us something? Maybe not, but what is your thinking? We're more interested in your thinking before starting the annotation than in seeing, a pretty map at the end. We really want you to think of the annotation as a way of exploring and understanding the text. It doesn't have to be necessarily a place-based kind of annotation, although it was a class on place. But if you're more drawn towards, people, or towards some other aspects that you want to highlight, feel free to perform any kind of annotation. Just maybe say something about it, explain what is your rationale. So the link that I've shared with you is the link to the main document. What you should do is cloning that document to your workplace, and then you can create all annotations that you want. That will be your independent copy, and no one will see what you're doing with that copy. And I'm going to show you how to do that using the document that Gabby just shared with me. So you will see something like that when you click on the document that I shared with you. What you have to do is click on the user. Here is Gabriel Baudard. In the document that I've shared with you will be me, will be Valeria Vitale. You click on it, and basically you access the user's public documents. You will see my public documents if you click on my username. And then you select the document, and you will see this clone to my workspace. And you just do that. You click clone to my workspace, and you will see the document appearing in your account. If you go back to your account, you will have, Ovid's Metamorphosis is now your personal copy, and you can do whatever you like with it. This is what I wanted to show you before, for the exercise. Okay, you can stop sharing my screen now, Gabby.
In their case, of course, it won't be Ovid's Metamorphosis. It'll be the inscriptions from the Theatre of Dionysus, but yes.
Sorry?
Great.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Yes, it won't be Ovid. It would be the other document. I needed another document to show you this.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Great. They can, of course, after having cloned it, they can choose to make it public, and they can post the link in the GitHub issue ticket as well, so that other people can look at their annotations. They won't necessarily be able to make any further annotations, but able to see what they've done. And that might be a useful way to share your work. If you were, for example, doing this for an assessed project, you could share it via a URL.
Yeah, all the sharing options are also in the tutorial.
Yeah. Cool. So I've attempted to post most of the URLs to major projects that were mentioned in the chat as we went along. Some of them, unfortunately, didn't work, as Peripleo is down today for maintenance. And,
I forgot to. It's actually down almost always because it's retired. But if I tell Rainer, he would have turned it on just for us, but
for us to play with today, right?
I didn't think that we were going to use it.
And a street near you must have been mentioned on the television or in a newspaper or something today, because it's a very powerful website, but it's currently receiving too many hits, and it regularly receives tens of thousands of hits per day. So it must be receiving like 1 million visitors today, and so it's not working very well. But get it on a quieter day. It's a cool place to experiment with. Yeah.
Good.
Yes, and we'll any of those URLs that are relevant we can put on the session page as well. Yeah, that's a good idea. Great, thank you. Cool. Okay. Any final questions or comments? Then we're technically out of time.
Okay.
Okay. In that case, thank you both very much again, and please join us next week when our next session is on the reuse of heritage, and that will feature Andrea Wallace from the University of Exeter and Douglas McCarthy from the Europeana Foundation. And that'll be a very exciting session. So hopefully see you all then. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye. Thank you.